I had a wish, it would be to stop time, not for any reason except I didn't want to miss any of the time with my kids. Step out of the world, literally just spin the dial, land on a location, and I go there for 1 year. And I take all this money that I've made, and I just keep $10,000 in my back pocket, and I go live life for 1 year as the unknown Sean Hart in some territory where nobody knows me. And it's not for the reason most people think. It's because the problem in running a life where the success has followed you is everybody looks at your LinkedIn or your resume or what you've done or people that you've influenced, and they say, he must be good because of what he's done. But as an individual, I always thought, I wonder if I could do this again without the help of my mentors. I wonder if I could do this again without these people having really sort of helped me along. I think the mindset of someone who's a high achiever is always going, could I do it again? Could I even do it better the next time? And with this current role that I was in when I started a year ago, nobody knew me. Nobody knew me in the business that I was in. And it's been the greatest play out of a wish, call it 12 years later. And I love that about it. And so when I talk about the next 10 years, I love the fact that I can do what I get to do. And I jokingly say, although this is not a joke about cancer, I'm a gunfighter with cancer. What I mean by that is the worst way for a gunfighter to die is living to an old age with cancer, right? I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory. So I get to be doing what I'm doing right now and showing all the 20, 30, 40-year-old that I'm mentoring, look, I'll go into a meeting with the CEO right now and tell them exactly what I think. And they generally love it because a lot of people are afraid to say what the reality is. And I'll always preface it by saying that, hey, this is just my opinion. But I think we're a lot better place, whether you're in your 40s or 50s or even early 60s, by knowing who you are, living in the shoes that fit you, and using all the things that you've gained up to this point in life, 35 years of working, to really direct and help all the people still coming through the system to what their next big step in life is. And I mean that. What are the next 10 years to hold? I don't know. I'm not sure I even care. Even if someone said, do you want to see what happens? I'd say, no, I don't want to know what happens 10 years. Because, man, I get to live a much closer life to living every day for all it's worth right now than I ever have in life before. Because I don't have to worry about how do I afford something 35, 40 years from now. That was me in my 20s. Now I just get to go, what does Monday hold? What does the next hour hold? And that's a beauty that you don't always get to do in your 30s with kids, and wives and schedules and nap time and bedtimes. And it's fun time. And the impact that people say, hey, Dave, really thanks for being a mentor. And I get to say thanks for, being mentorable, that's the great part.
Most people in their early 20s aren't lost.
They're just early.
That's right. Welcome to After the Bell, conversations for young professionals figuring out what comes next without pretending to have it all figured out. I'm Nick Kaufman-Mamisashvili. Welcome to my office. Sean, good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Yes, I'm doing great. Good to see you too. It looks like New York is treating you well.
Yeah, me and this crammed little office, we're doing real great.
Space is at a premium, I remember.
Yeah. So you remember, you lived at New York at a certain point in your life?
Well, first, they have in between the two main transition points in my career. I had one career sort of stopped and then moved to another one. I got the opportunity to be in New York. I ultimately turned down the job after spending some time there, but got to spend a good deal of time in New York and looking at a place to live. And I realized that, things don't go quite as far in New York as they do in Kansas City when it comes to cost per square foot.
Okay, it was the cost. I was thinking maybe it was the rats.
No, the rats, they're sizable. They go a long way. You got those in droves.
That's awesome. Well, Sean, I wanted to let everybody kind of know why we're connecting and why you're here. And so Sean mentored me in a really, I would say, critical time in my life where I was discerning what comes next, how to have next level conversations in terms of how to leverage where I was at in my career at the time. And I had so many valuable conversations. And so that's why you're here as my mentor. And since I've moved to New York, we haven't had a chance to really catch up. And this is just really exciting for me personally to see you, to catch up, and to just reminisce on how you've affected me and my trajectory, and ultimately where we've landed now really stems out of an encouragement of you telling me, take the leap, let it roll, let's see what happens. So thanks for being
Well, I
here.
mean, you made it pretty easy. I remember the first couple times we met, and you had the youthful exuberance to do 1,000 things between the coaching soccer and helping out with some of the immigration folks that you'd taken care of, and working closely with the church and influencing youth and starting a new chapter of the church downtown, and going through all these things, not to mention the great musical talent you have. And it was fun watching so much talent come together in the same direction.
Well, thank you. Well, I felt that way every step of the way. You were just always encouraging me. Man, you have so many talents. I can see why you feel pulled in all these ways and why it's hard to advocate for yourself.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that
exactly.
was my biggest takeaway from our mentoring relationship was you're always saying, man, I'd love to give you direction, but it sounds like you could go in 7 different directions
Right.
very strongly. That was so refreshing to hear. I would go home often from our sessions and tell my wife, like, he sees me for who I am and what I'm capable of. And regardless of how everything transpires, just having somebody who makes me feel seen and heard is one of the more valuable traits in a mentor that I was looking for. And so it was just a perfect season and a perfect alignment of having you in that season.
I'm the lucky one. It's been fun, and glad we're still at least connected like this, and it's great to see how you're doing.
Yeah, we're doing really well in New York. It's beautiful here. And so we're just really starting to live into the New York beauty. It really is an otherworldly experience
Yeah.
coming from Kansas City. So I know you know. So let's walk through a little bit where you're coming from and what your impact on the world has been so far, not just in your career, but also as a family man and as somebody who's helped other people find their way. So talk about whatever lane you'd like, but let's try to cover as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, I've been blessed, and I'm thankful every day for it, especially as now in my 40s. And everybody can relate to, life going quickly in your 20s and 30s, and kids, and pace of play is ridiculous, and you can barely get enough sleep, and the next thing comes around. But for me, I grew up in a family that was highly competitive. I'll put it that way. It wasn't always easy. I have a brother and a sister that, after a whole lot of years, we've all stayed in touch, but we're really just now really putting our relationships back together and connecting. We've all been fans of one another. It's just uh, our parents were a bit divisive, and thankful for all they did, but they made us all high achievers, and that was their top goal. And so from my perspective, I sort of ran early in life, being a young CEO in my 20s of a company that did biotech and pharmaceutical research. Founded a business with 3 partners, all 25, 30 years older than me, and sort of took everything by storm, built a business, continued to do some of the things I love, like golf and play baseball and softball, and then had young kids. In the meantime, I was kind of living 2 lives. There was the life of a growing business, and sold the business and got in with some folks that really knew private equity and really knew venture capital. We grew a business, bought businesses. So I was kind of living this way above my pay grade life and learning quickly. It was all about production. It was all about results. And on the other side, I'd come home, and I was always one very similar to you. I always wanted to have kids, and you learn things from your parents, and then you also learn what you would rather have seen yourself. And so I applied that model quite a bit in my marriage, and then when the kids were young, and even to this day, I've been blessed with being able to be a dad, which was at the end of everything what I wanted to do most. And got a chance to coach each one of my kids in their separate sports that they like doing. And with my son, I was a baseball guy through college, so I got to coach all that team from 5th graders right up till high school graduation, and on club team. And So really, really loved it. That probably, without knowing, was as much of the mentoring that I never saw coming. Just being able to impact the lives of so many young guys, and in the case of my daughters, their friends. I still get the Instagram stuff. Hey, coach, I'm coming back in town, or hey, coach, got this issue going on. So it doesn't end. And my feeling was it was going to end. Like they get to 18. Because I wasn't their dad, I was their coach. It allowed for an ability to mentor, which I loved every bit of. On the work side, I was a young up and comer, learned a lot from multiple different mentors. I have one specifically who taught me the business. Like I said, sold a company, learned how mergers and acquisitions and drawdown capital all worked. At the end of 2011, we sold a business to what is now Express Scripts, which is a gigantic company. And that was probably the writing on the wall. I'm not really a big company guy. When I was the young CEO, everybody questioned, like, why are you letting this young guy run the business? What, he doesn't deserve it. He hasn't been through the fires. And why do you trust his judgment? So I always had to prove myself. And it taught me to trust people along the way and really mentor into young folks around my age and even younger. It didn't matter their age. It mattered how much did they want to commit to the working together. That was a big piece of it. And then as I got a bit older, things sort of flipped where people would come, hey, can you show me how you did this in your 30s? I want to be a CEO when I'm in my 40s. I want to be a C-suite member. I want to be executive VP. Everybody wanted their career. So I spent a lot of time working with folks. And then over the last 10 years, I've really worked a lot building business in Asia Pacific and in the oncology world. So we've been focusing on developing new cancer medicines, which in itself, I get tutored all the time on the science because it's happening so quickly. Oftentimes I'm mentoring someone who's wanting to replace me. And that's a tricky thing. Because to be successful, a fast growing business, you need to be training people that are better than you, that work for you. And if they're better than you at some point, you're going to have to step aside. And that's fine. And then prepare for that and be comfortable with that. And the business will be good. And be open and honest about it. So those are the things that I get to do. Currently working for a business called Precision for Medicine, do a lot of advising with them, work full time for them. But I got the beauty of getting to work with 3 or 4 people that when I left that company wanted to move over to this company. And I got the beauty of being able to join a team of people I really trusted from my past and bring over a team that we'd spent the last 10 years working together and get to marry those up. And as it relates to the mentoring piece, at the end of all this, just like you and I developed a trust amongst one another. If you're focused on what they're telling you, not on yourself, but on what they're telling you, you earn their trust, and then they trust back in you. And it goes a long way in the personal world, the business world, and as I've learned with my kids, the kids world too. So that's kind of an outline of sort of where we at.
I'm remembering now that one of the things I connected with you most on was the fact that you coached your son. My dad coached a couple of my teams in basketball and soccer growing up. And to this day, like my teammates, friends from high school and middle school and beyond still call him coach. And I also am thinking about how said you need to kind of replace yourself. You need to help someone succeed. You need to pass down not only knowledge, but how do you shake hands in a way that builds trust? How do you create systems that keep a good thing going when you are removed from the situation? And I imagine that coaching really helped you refine that process that you had with younger folks that you wanted to take your position? Because I feel like you can school me on this, but I feel like a lot of people in the C-suite are like, I'm going to protect this C-suite until I'm too old to do it anymore. I'm not going to replace myself. I've seen some people do it well. I've seen the majority of people just not really be interested in doing it as if they're going to live forever. Walk me through the humility of that process to say, I'm not going to do this forever, nor do I want to. I want to give somebody else a chance and get out of the way. The paycheck's going to end. That's probably going to be the hardest part. But walk me through that process. How do you identify someone? What are you looking for in someone who you feel can take charge of the monster that is whatever you're running or creating? And then walk me through the process of stepping down. Is it quick? Is it slow? Is it painful? Is it elated?
Yeah. There's a statement that goes with a lot of sort of the premier college coaches, whether it be basketball or football or even professional. The one thing about every coach is there's only two ways it ends. They retire because they get old, or you're going to be asked to move on. That's the great, great majority of every coach. Now, I never coached at the professional level, but that's a statement that I've heard multiple times. And when I coach folks who want to get to the C-suite, I tell them it's great, but once you get to the C-suite, you don't have any friends in the C-suite. The world doesn't work that way. Either people are wanting your job or wanting to step over you to get to the job that you both want. It's a funny vibe, and I'm sure this plays true in sports, in life, and in even in religion, where there needs to be a senior leader amongst the elders, and that's a coveted role. So I just tell people it's a lonely spot at times because you need to build up a group that will work with you. And some of the best CEOs that I've ever worked with are people that get into the C-suite. Everybody's like they're the smartest. They're all like Steve Jobs. They're just beyond everybody in intelligence. That's not the case. In fact, most folks that are so smart like that have a hard time relating to everybody else amongst them, as did Steve Jobs. And I just use him as an example because he's so notorious for what he did. But some of the best folks I ever worked with were really talented, really organized, great at communication, and they could bring people in. So you bring a new CEO in or whatever, and that person's able to bring a new CFO, a new COO, a new chief medical officer, chief market, whatever it is. They're able to bring a couple people and add them to what is a team, and people start to see that trust and believe in that trust. Number two, there's a reason why most CEOs only last 5 to 10 years in the business. It's a high burnout job. So I tell people, don't assume you're going to do this for the rest of your life. Know when you're best equipped to do this. And a lot of people, it's in their 50s, but you start to see the new generational push where it's in your 30s. Well, there's a wear effect on it. All the decision making, all the people questioning what goes on. You're constantly in decision-making mode with limited information. And so that's why it's usually not a 20-year job. It's usually a 5 to 15-year job. But probably like you with your dad, when you're coaching sports that you played yourself and excelled with, it's similar to the coaching in the business world because you're now coaching a sport that you used to excel at. Like if you think one day about you coaching soccer to your child, in order to keep their attention and be successful, they have to believe in you. It's the same thing when you talk about business, especially when you're in the C-suite or when you're a senior leadership position in a business. And then at some point when you're looking over the horizon, you realize it's time for me to step away. It's time for me to step down. It's usually quick. It's always painful. And it's not the money you miss most. It's the ability to make a decision. The further you get up in the food chain, you work with the board. The board makes the decisions, but you're going to the board with the solutions, and they're just saying yes. So, it's interesting in that, again, I take a lot from the coaching because I had to get at a 12-year-old level, 14-year-old level, 15-year-old, whatever. Nobody agrees with anything an adult says. And you had to make them convinced that this is the things that are going to make you better. And individualize it, but also incorporate it amongst the whole team. Like I can coach a third baseman to be a great third baseman as an individual, but I also have to coach him how he fits into the team. Like this is what you need to do when you're hitting to be the best for the team. And that's the same thing with business. It's the same thing with religion. It's the same thing with friendships. It's all those things. Everything's about making the future better. Next generation, the next friendship, the next whatever. And that's what becomes so important. My career says I got to be a senior leader early. I loved it. And every year that's gone by, I've kind of taken a position that is less of that senior role. So CEO to chief commercial officer was a step that was categorically down, but I still had a huge responsibility. And as you get into bigger businesses, your title doesn't matter because a senior vice president at a 3,000 person company is quite different than a chief operating officer at a 50-person company. Understandable. But regardless of what it is, the minute you start to feel like the people that you're coaching and working with are as good or better than you, that's when you need to start preparing what's going to come next. And I've had the luxury of stepping into a role while I'm advising people, and I jumped into a company where no one really knew me, and they didn't realize that I had all these past with these companies that we built and the roles I'd been. No one looked up like he was a CEO, he was a chief commercial officer. They just thought I was the next goofball that came in the company. And it's been great because I've got to see things from a completely different angle. It's been a great learning experience for me in order to help mentor folks as they move through the food chain and up into the leadership position, because I can now connect again to what I was doing when I was in my 20s. People judged me between my 20s and 50s on what I'd accomplished. And now I had to sort of retest that. And it's been great. So it gives me perspective to work with people. But when it ends, it generally ends pretty quickly. And it's painful because you're used to everybody listening to you. And they don't anymore. It's kind of similar when your kids move from 11 and 12 and you're the center of their world to 14 and they're like, you know what you're talking about, Dad. You're like, what happened to that buddy of mine? What happened to that princess that used to love everything I said? Nah, we don't. That long ago, Dad. Long ago. It's very similar. Life changes quickly.
The sofa chairs starts to grow out of the back of your head, and like they can take you. And having worked with teenagers for 15 years, I just always crack up when those kids get to the point where they think they can take their parents and where they think their parents know absolutely nothing. And what's so funny is I would always tell parents at the pre-year meeting, look, your kid is going to come home and say some stuff, and I want you to give me the benefit of the doubt, because I just want to let you know that your kid is going to say some stuff about you, and I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, knowing that they think the sofa chair's growing out of the back of your head and that they think they can take you sitting down. I just it's really great. It's a really great perspective. Do you find that there's more C-suite or just say senior leadership roles of folks in their 50s now? Do you think that comes from a hunger that starts in their 20s and then they just are dogs and they just find themselves getting opportunities or they're grooming relationships? Or do you think something has systematically shifted in the workforce where that is become possible?
Well, I think it's both probably, but I would think the bigger of the two is there's been a complete shift in how businesses are managed and run. It used to be you had to work through a hierarchical level, and by the time you got into your 50s, you had enough experience, and somebody on the board, which were generally in their 60s, would give you trust to run their company in their 50s. And again, at giant companies, this is probably still true. Some of the companies we've worked for, like Pfizer and Eli Lilly and household names like that, there's not 30-year-olds running them. But with the biotechs and companies that Pfizer buys to get their pipeline of new medicines better than its competition, there's a lot of 30-year-olds running those. And the reason is access to information, access to use technology as a benefit to the process. People are taking a lot greater risks in their 20s and 30s to make those companies happen. And interestingly, again, I don't really have all the data, but their ability to run businesses is bringing down the average age of a senior leader or leader in a role, because they're investing in companies and spending their time. There's just been a transition that says there's a greater ability to trust, and the world's a lot flatter. So when you look at what we're being compared to, we're seeing tons of folks coming in from all around the world to be here in the United States. And it's still true that for me to work with 35-year-old CEOs of biotech companies in China or Australia, or 40-year-olds in Japan, that never used to something you'd see. And the same thing is true in the market here in the US and across Europe. It's just, I think people always assumed because they were younger, they weren't knowledgeable. Now their knowledge is peaking in their 30s, and they're making it up with experience by people they're bringing on to support their experience. That's what we've seen a lot more of, and it's working, quite honestly.
Surrounding themselves with people who have experience.
Yeah, they will mentor them along their way.
That's so interesting. Moving to New York myself, I'm in the midst of transition between careers. I'm doing this podcast out of an excitement for being in transition, just like young professionals in their 20s are in transition and trying to navigate the landscape of AI and one of the worst hiring workforces in the last 20 years. I'm 36 and I've got a 1-year-old, and that's so interesting. What you're saying is you've got more 30-year-olds having kids later, or maybe choosing not to have kids at all because now finally they feel stable. They finally maybe are in a place where their student loans are not crushing them and they're able to make headway and they've found some work-life balance. Maybe they've gone to some parks, maybe they've found relationships that are fun to be in, and they haven't had kids to stress them out. But at the same time, they're also becoming senior level leaders and relying on childcare that will take the child for 9 hours a day. And I start to wonder what kind of ramifications is this going to have for society as a whole. But it's not going to happen in 4 years from now. It's going to happen 20 years from now when those kids are entering the workforce and they're affected by whatever they subliminally learned in childhood, subconsciously learned, or were consciously taught through a competitive household. I think history has a tendency to repeat itself, but in this season, it feels like history is being made for the first time. What do you think is the trajectory or the path, if you will, for someone who wants to become a senior level leader because they like ownership, they like responsibility, they like the challenge, they like the ability to have control over things that they feel matter, are in their sphere of effectiveness? Do you think there is a trajectory or a pathway if you were going to line it out for a young adult in their 20s?
I'd say a couple of things. Number one, I do think there's a new, as you mentioned, history has a tendency to repeat itself. I don't think that's what's happening. I think history is being made. That's what I think. And I'll come back to that. For those folks who want to get into, I'll call them the big jobs, the jobs where people really, the pay is great. The work is interesting, but there's a lot of it. I think the message that I want to make sure is heard loud and clear for anybody who asks that, you need to make a decision fairly early on. What do you want your life to look like? Because what I can tell you that's not available is I want a work-life balance that says I'm going to work some and not other times, and I want to be a senior leader in a company. I want to make the big bucks, and I want to grow a company. I don't care whether you're selling soccer balls or new autoimmune drugs. If you're the leader of a business, anything above 2 people in a business to 10, 15,000, you're working hard. There is no replacing working hard. Granted, we have great new tools, but the more tools we develop, the more expectations grow. The faster we need to have data to our access. We've moved from an era of somebody called you and giving them a pink slip and putting it on their desk to now people don't even listen to the voicemail because AI has summarized anybody who's archaic enough to leave a voicemail, and it's been backed up by 3 MS Teams messages, right? So the world is moving faster. I think we're in a new era that says, let's talk a little bit about the workforce. Workforce used to look something along the lines as bunch of men, good number of women go to college, they graduate, have a tendency to get into the workforce. More opportunities came along for men than women. The pay was higher for men than women. Things got in a schism. That's why you saw senior leaders. There was more trust and investment. It's been broke. That glass ceiling has been broken through a lot. And if you start to look at the workforce and say, who's going to university right now? Women are way outpacing men. It's not even close anymore to what it used to be. And it's now flipping in the favor of the faster growth in workforce, the faster growth in wages, the faster leadership. We're seeing women at an all-time high rate, as well as minorities, which is great. Except you start to then ask the question, how does that affect family? And I mean, I can say with even the team that I coached in baseball, there was a decision for 2 or 3 of the families that I got to sort of live through, because you have to know, do I send a text to mom or dad to make sure the kid's going to be on time for the game? And even in the 8 to 12 years of coaching them, I started to see a lot more dads staying home. And 2 of them specifically, one was an MD, one was a dentist, good friends of mine. They both were married to a dentist and an MD, and they had to make the decision, does mom's doctor career or dad's doctor career go forward? Because we want to give our kids, the proper parenting. And the mother stayed in the workforce and the father became stay-at-home dad. Same thing is true of the dentist. And again, the wife stayed in the workforce and the dad took care of the kids. Great parents. That's something you wouldn't have heard very often in the 90s and early 2000s. So I think we've seen a lot of that sort of thing occur. And I think you're going to see a lot more of it, especially with who's, like I said, who's graduating. So I think that's what we're starting to see what is occurring. But to go back to the question that you asked, okay, if you're going to want to be in the big job, are you ready to commit to that? And what is the family infrastructure around you going to look like? Because boards meet around their schedule, not around yours. Clients, everybody's got clients. Clients need you to get their stuff done faster than we've ever seen in this world before. You're going to have to build leadership teams amongst you. You have to get out there and meet enough people that you can bring leadership teams to you as a senior leader. And you've got to be competitive with everybody who's around you in your same vertical to bring the talent to your team. So all those things add up to me saying, if you want to be in the senior leadership role, then make sure you've got a family, if you have them, that's supporting that. And it's not 32 hours a week or 37 hours a week. Path to leadership is built with 50 to 80-hour weeks. You can't be on a ship searching for new territories with a foot still on land. You got to put both feet in the boat and go. And that sounds cliche, but that hasn't changed. That part of leadership has not changed. You got to be willing to work and put the time in.
I love that. I totally agree. I can't think of a single year for the last 15 years where I worked any less than 50 hours a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I mean, the proof is in my portfolio of what I've done and how I've invested in people and what I've accomplished. I would not say I've been compensated maybe in the way that looks like my portfolio, but that's because of the path that I chose as much as anything.
Yeah, and to be fair to everything you're saying, the older I get, the more I realize you also need to make, to your point, the decision, do I want to impact people? Do I want to impact lives? Or do I want to have the bigger bank account? The two don't always go together. But I promise, the things you've done over the last 15 years and those 50, I was just listening to some of the stuff with the youth that you helped when working at, the church, went a lot further than a lot of the things I spent time on mentoring young leaders to grow up and be successful and get into the C-suite. Both are needed, but at the end of the day, I think impact on the world, your 50 hours probably is going to help the world a lot more than my 50 hours.
It's so interesting. My wife is an attorney and she's a doggone good one.
Yeah.
I mean, even here in New York, she just started 4 months ago and she's already emerging as one of the front runners of the trustworthy person in the office. Everyone wants to lean in and everyone can come to, and her door's open, and she works 90 hours some weeks. She's just putting it in the work. And that's just the type of person there is. And that's one of the reasons I was so attracted to her when we met. I didn't know she was going to be a lawyer when we first met, but after I got to know her, I was so drawn to her just dogged determination to be the best. One of the things that I am seeing, and I saw this a lot with the students I mentored, is in these new generations with YouTube, there's all these entrepreneurial ways to get ahead.
Sure.
YouTube generally is not very profitable if you're just going to be doing videos or whatever. There's some people based on sponsorships and stuff that have made a good keep. But what I found really inspiring is Gen Xers. Specifically, I'm thinking of Gen Xers who are athletes and millennials, I think it's actually more millennials, are giving back. So they're making all these millions of dollars and then they're giving it back. Or I've seen a couple billionaires do this as well, and they catch a lot of flack because they have certain beliefs about things or this or that and the other. But to give away billions of dollars, even though it's maybe a small portion of your portfolio, or even millions of dollars, it still takes a mindset aligned with generosity. And I think generosity is something you cultivate over a lifetime. And I have heard from many of my students, I want to get rich so that, and it's always a so that, I can give it away. And the one thing I always try to teach them is you don't need millions to be able to be proportionally generous. But I do understand that there's this excitement around, I can be so generous from the income that I earn that it can change the legacy of the world's trajectory, right, which I think is fantastic. Where I find my excitement is being able to inspire those young people to reach and attain their dream and to continually encourage them along the way, because no matter how rich you get, life never stops becoming hard. You never stop dealing.
No, yeah, that's right.
That's right. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions of folks who are wealthier in the C-suite or senior leadership. I'm curious, having said all that, how do you think about what I've just laid out, which is I want to make it big. Maybe that's becoming an attorney. Maybe that's becoming a CEO so that I can be more generous.
think I think you're right. I think that is more public. I think it used to be something that was probably more hidden amongst really wealthy benefactors, where it was like, I'm going to give a ton of money, but I want it to be anonymous. Or I made all this money and, we'll give it to philanthropies, this kind of thing. And I remember when I was a kid, my dad said, hey, if you ever want to know why I became a doctor, my dad was a psychiatrist. He had plenty of good material to work with me, clearly. He said, go read the book, The Magnificent Obsession. And the whole book is based upon, it was a famous movie in the 50s, but the book is complicated because it's written in 1920s dialect and there's words in it I don't even know if still exist. But I read it. And the point of the book was the mentor would do a lot of things for people, but it was all behind the scenes. And the minute he did something, whether it was starting someone up in a business and saying, hey, pay me back when you can. If you can't, no big deal. Or giving someone a job, helping someone with an opportunity, setting someone else in a home, whatever it was, the point was the minute I do this for you, the magic is all used up. No matter if you repay me or not, I'm getting more of this because I'm doing it for God than I'm doing it for recognition. So I think that was kind of, as I lay out the things you're talking about, that was kind of the past. I think people with social media and a much more public lifestyle, I think people are doing that more out in the open for a couple of reasons, because it motivates them and it also allows them to influence others to do the same. And I think, I don't know who started it, but thank gosh they did, because I think that piece is something we're seeing a lot more. And I think the millennials and Gen Zs are to be credited for helping switch our world to focusing on that. Now, is it everywhere and is everyone doing it? No. One of the things about having been successful or fairly successful when it comes to business that, I've been a religious man, but to myself more than, highly public. And we've talked about that. No matter how much I made and gave back and this, I'm always still of the mindset of that famous fable where the millionaire can give $100,000, $200,000, $500,000, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, you gave so much. But God rewarded the person that gave $1 that only had $1.10. A lot more. Even though that dollar didn't do a lot to help everybody, it was the mindset of, I'll give you everything I have. And that's always been in the back of my brain, like, okay, you're successful. And I think maybe in this rare case, maybe that message has gotten out, whether by intention or whether by luck, folks that are saying, hey, let's give back right now. It's created an infection amongst people in a good way where I'm willing to give more because I know you're going to give it back to other people, as opposed to I'm going to give you something, you're going to use 10% of it to give back to people. I think it's created a bit of a brush fire with giving, and I think that's great.
No, I think it's really great too. I think the boomer generation is the most well-off financially generation. And what I've observed for myself, having come from a lower middle class family, and my wife coming from struggling to get water and lights and heat on in the wintertime and getting frostbite because of it, or having to wash the same pair of clothes over and over and over again because that's all you could afford and you couldn't buy new shoes and all these, anyway, starving for days at a time. Her mindset is, I'm doing a job to survive and I'm going to get as far away from my version of poverty as I possibly can. Having grown up in a lower middle class family, always living paycheck to paycheck, but we had enough. I'm like, I want to inspire people. I want to do a job that doesn't necessarily have to pay a lot, but it puts joy in my heart and it puts smiles on faces. And I'm not saying that someone else from a lower middle class family is going to choose the same thing as me, but I feel generally, and again, feel free to snap back at me, but I feel like generally for people who have, it's easier to say, I want to give anonymously because that just feels humble and I don't need to be seen for it. It's not a big deal. And then for people who don't have, it's like, I gave everything and they're jumping up and down and they're dancing on the tables, and maybe they're not doing it in front of everyone because like you said, everything is so highly public these days. It's almost impossible to hide what you're doing, even if you wanted to do it privately. But this happened with my in-laws. They loaned us some money so we could put a down payment on our house and not have to pay PMI. And we were so grateful. And then my wife and I, we made an internal decision that we were going to pay them back within 2 years because we didn't want the debt hanging over us, even though they were giving it to us at a 0% interest rate. And when we handed them that last check at the end of the 2 years, they had zero reactions. It was just like, it didn't matter. Like for that, it was a little tiniest little drop in their bucket. They didn't really need it, but we were elated, jumping up and down. We had ice cream in our hand and we like gave them the check and we were huge smiles on our faces. We were like jiggling with giddiness. So I just feel like from my experience, from my wife's experience, from general experience of seeing what happens, I feel like the anonymity often comes from affluence and the excitement typically comes from a place of having less. Do you find that to be true? Would you argue with me?
I always argue with you just for the fun of it, but no, I'm not going to argue directly with you. I think I can explain. I think there's reasons for it. I think, there's example after example in the scientific world of things that are bad for us that we do, where the longer you do them, the less impact they have on you. So the dopamine receptors in your brain aren't firing like they did when you were younger in whatever bad thing you were doing. Like the classic example is doing cocaine or some kind of drug. The longer you do it, the less you're bringing down the curve of what the excitement level is. And so you get to a point where you're chasing all kinds of bad things in order to get a shorter high. So, and I'm not saying that's the case, but clearly being able to do something like give, if you're not able to give a bunch, you're going to have a greater reaction. I do think the science would say there's a piece to that. I think the flip side of it, I'm lucky enough to sit on the Children's Mercy Hospital board, and there's a lot of big givers that they work with and we work with. And a lot of them stay anonymous, and there's a reason for it, which is if somebody were to find out that you made $1 million gift to open a new operating room at Children's Mercy Hospital, how many other people do you think are going to be calling on you? That's unfortunately the reality for folks that have a lot. They're also pursued by a lot. And so I think the anonymity part sometimes you see is because they don't want 7,000 people coming ringing their doorbell asking for more money. So I think that's a piece of it. Having been in the point where I try to give a lot, I have to say over time the impact and my feeling, it's a bit like what I was explaining with the first analogy. I feel really proud, but not as much when I was in my 20s and couldn't afford it. I think there's something about I put everything on the line and I gave it, and I feel great about that, and let's go celebrate. And we gave what we could, and you feel super about it. I think you're always left, if you've got a bunch left over, you go, well, I gave $100,000, but should I give it 150? Should I give it 200? I probably could push myself and give 500, and maybe that's where the elation sits. I don't know. I really don't know, but I know that everything that you explain, I've heard before. To be quite frank, I think it's probably true.
Yeah. It's interesting because I find, having worked with students and mentored them for so long, just their exuberance is through the roof. And it's impossible actually to harness all of it and use it all for good, even though it could change the entire world in one day. There's so much of it. And I think one of the greatest disservices that we do to the students is go, it's not really the way the world works, or, that's cool, or just kind of brushing things off. I think we lose something by not staying connected to the original excitement we had when we had less, and had to grow into something. I've experienced it as coming off as proud, but I think what it really is adults who feel established, have established systems, and have established a second nature. It's natural, and I don't need to show what I'm naturally gifted in that I wasn't naturally gifted in 25 years ago when I started being generous. But I think that's kind of the difference between what we're seeing right now and the trend of keep it anonymous and share it out loud is that the people who are sharing it out loud are typically younger.
Yeah.
And the people who
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
being anonymous are typically older.
I think that's a fair statement.
I don't think it's necessarily a problem, but to your point earlier, is what you do in public, can it inspire? Because if it can inspire, then why not reconnect with the unbridled joy of being a kid and giving everything you have to something?
Yeah, I think I've had this conversation with a number of people, including folks that do therapy for a living. 'Cause in between my last job and this job, I got to do life coaching for people, and I constantly would leave sessions and ask myself the question, why don't I have more unbridled joy in what I'm doing at times? Like, I remember when I was 5 years old, and all I needed was that bag of little green, soldiers, little army men, and a sandbox, and I was the happiest son of a gun, and made whole scenes and would get the hose out and build a trench and then fill in the trench with water. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Like I just sit there in amazement and laugh. And then at some point you kind of learn, wow, that's foolish. Move on. I think that's sad. I think it's sad. And I think we need to get back to, as you mentioned, everybody should ask themselves this question. What is it that brings pure joy into my life? And whatever it is, go do that. Go do a lot more of that. Now, maybe you can't purely do that, but do a lot more of that because it's going to make the world a lot better place. And for those people that have forgotten what makes them joyous, then go figure that out before you tell us, because there's too many of those second folks that are in positions where they're teaching us all to walk away from it and just go do whatever I'm supposed to do. And I think we have never in society, as long as humans been on this earth, been in a place where the next generation or this current generation can go do those things that bring pure joy, including giving, and it's right at their fingertips right now. The ability that artificial intelligence, the systems that have been broken down, the ability for, the supercomputers that are being built that by the time you're almost my age are going to run the world, there's nothing we won't be able to do. I mean, we're at a point where we're taking gene sequences out of the body, changing them, putting back in the body, destroying cancer, changing genetic defects. Like this was talking to Children's Mercy. You're taking kids that have genetic defects, and we're able to reinsert new genes in cells that will change it in order to avoid chronic illnesses altogether. What? What? You can't be serious. That's where we are. And it was just a couple decades ago, we didn't even know how to decode DNA. So the world is our oyster right now. There's all kinds of things. We might as well do those things that bring great joy into everybody's life. And most importantly, our own. Because as you said, it takes only a few to create the wave, and then the wave of joy is a lot better place for this world to live in.
I love that. I think that's a really great encouragement to 20-somethings who are trying to establish themselves right now. Find the joy, find where, I like to say, and this was really Frederick Buechner who said this, find where your talents and passion intersect with the world's greatest needs. And I feel like that at that intersection is where you find a joy, deep joy, as you're describing. So Sean, I want to wrap us up by ending here. When you think back on mentorship in your own life, how has it impacted you in the sense of who you are today? Because you said you're full time, but you've made a couple transitions and you've been stepping down slowly. I imagine, and we talked about this with one of my other guests, that there is a second life transition at the end of the 50s and then 60s, which you're not there yet. But when you start to think about how you're going to have to reinvent yourself and how you're going to take all the skills, all the experiences that you've learned, all the ways that you have poured into others and you've been poured into, but you reflect on specifically how you've become the person, the man that you are today, how has a mentor in the past or just experience itself mentored you to help you feel confident that you can take on the next decade of your life with joy?
Again, that's a great thought process, and I'm not sure I have the answer. I don't remember there being a point where someone said, "You're a mentor now." It never happened. You're just like suddenly people are asking you. They've gone from thinking you're a cocky 30-year-old with a big title to someone who's just experienced a lot. and is useful in giving information or coaching or advice. It's a funny thing. It just appears one day, and then you're on podcast talking about. So before I started this new job, which was about a year ago, I'd gone through the period from 2013 through 2025, building a business that we ended up selling. Before I went on that journey, I was talking to a magazine or something about this, and it really hit me. And I've told my kids this: if I had a wish, it would be to stop time, not for any reason except I didn't want to miss any of the time with my kids. Step out of the world, literally just spin the dial, land on a location, and I go there for 1 year. And I take all this money that I've made, and I just keep $10,000 in my back pocket, and I go live life for 1 year as the unknown Sean Hart in some territory where nobody knows me. And it's not for the reason most people think. It's because the problem in running a life where the success has followed you is everybody looks at your LinkedIn or your resume or what you've done or people that you've influenced, and they say, he must be good because of what he's done. But as an individual, I always thought, I wonder if I could do this again without the help of my mentors. I wonder if I could do this again without these people having really sort of helped me along. I think the mindset of someone who's a high achiever is always going, could I do it again? Could I even do it better the next time? And with this current role that I was in when I started a year ago, nobody knew me. Nobody knew me in the business that I was in. And it's been the greatest play out of a wish, call it 12 years later. And I love that about it. And so when I talk about the next 10 years, I love the fact that I can do what I get to do. And I jokingly say, although this is not a joke about cancer, I'm a gunfighter with cancer. What I mean by that is the worst way for a gunfighter to die is living to an old age with cancer, right? I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory. So I get to be doing what I'm doing right now and showing all the 20, 30, 40-year-old that I'm mentoring, look, I'll go into a meeting with the CEO right now and tell them exactly what I think. And they generally love it because a lot of people are afraid to say what the reality is. And I'll always preface it by saying that, hey, this is just my opinion. But I think we're a lot better place, whether you're in your 30s or 50s or even early 60s, by knowing who you are, living in the shoes that fit you, and using all the things that you've gained up to this point in life, 35 years of working, to really direct and help all the people still coming through the system to what their next big step in life is. And I mean that. What are the next 10 years to hold? I don't know. I'm not sure I even care. Even if someone said, do you want to see what happens? I'd say, no, I don't want to know what happens 10 years. Because, man, I get to live a much closer life to living every day for all it's worth right now than I ever have in life before. Because I don't have to worry about how do I afford something 35, 40 years from now. That was me in my 20s. Now I just get to go, what does Monday hold? What does the next hour hold? And that's a beauty that you don't always get to do in your 30s with kids, and wives and schedules and nap time and bedtimes and it's fun time. And the impact that people say, hey, Dave, really thanks for being a mentor, and I get to say thanks for being mentorable. That's the great part.
I love that. That's such a good word. Sounds like you spun the world and put your finger down and it landed right in your backyard.
Yeah, I didn't anticipate that. That's exactly right. Exactly right.
That's awesome. I'm glad that you got to experience that. Any one last thought for anyone listening in their who's looking for direction or hope?
Yeah, I would just say, don't need to find hope. Hope is all around you, first of all. And this has been said 1,000 times, so I'll say it 1,001 times. Always be yourself. No matter how good you think acting like somebody else for a while, it'll always catch up to you. Just be who you are. And that will get you 10 times farther than anything else. Work on yourself. Do the things that you need to do, whether it's meditating, whether it's going on walks, whether it's getting to nature, whether it's doing some therapy for dealing with stuff in life that happened. All those things are things I've done. And I'm only a better person today because of it. But do the things that are going to get you the self-care, the self-help, the self-evaluation, and do it every single day.
That's beautiful. That's been such a through line for this podcast. Be yourself, invest in yourself, be your best self for others. I love that. Keep working on yourself and trust the process. And I want to encourage anyone out there, if you're looking for a mentor like a Sean, I would love to be a mentor for you. I've been mentoring people, students and young adults for the last 15 years, and I would feel honored to be your mentor. And let's set up a call. You can find my information at my website, afterthebellnyc.com. And Sean, it has been a pleasure to be with you, my friend. So good to reconnect. Thank you so much for your mentorship, and I'll be wishing you the best in your next adventure.
We talk soon, my friend.
Cheers, everybody.